If you have topics you would like to have us discuss on the Aging Well podcast, please click on the links in the episode description to send us a text or record your message or comments. We'd love to hear from you and how we can help you age well. If you benefit from the Aging Well podcast and would like to support the content financially, please click on the Support the Show link or support our affiliates and advertisers. Welcome to the Aging Well podcast. I'm Jeff Armstrong here with Corbin Bruton. In this and the episodes that follow, we will share candid discussions on aging and hear from the experts. We are here to inform and encourage as we experience, aging. Today I want to talk about the simplicity of fitness in practice. Let's just begin with some of the basics, the components of physical fitness and athletic performance, and the principles of adaptation and the other things that I teach in pretty much a basic exercise physiology class. Well, first, what are the components of physical fitness? Well, physical fitness can be broken down into really two main categories: health-related components of physical fitness and neuromotor skill-related components of physical fitness. And those health-related components of physical fitness include cardiorespiratory endurance, muscle strength, muscle endurance, flexibility, and body composition. Whereas motor skill-related involves speed, power, balance, coordination, agility, and reaction time. Now, the basic principles of adaptation include overload, specificity, progression, reversibility, and one very important one that I like to include, which is individuality. Overload just basically states that in order for a body system to adapt, we have to do more than that to which we are accustomed. Specificity is also sometimes stated as the SAID principle, that the body makes specific adaptations to impose demands. And so if I want to build strength, I have to do things that stimulate strength. If I want to build muscle endurance, I got to do things that are higher number of repetitions, promoting more endurance in the muscle, and so on. Progression is basically a follow-up to the overload principle. Overload should be progressive, meaning that we are going to progressively overload the system over time so that we promote greater and greater adaptation. Reversibility is the unfortunate use it or lose it principle, that if we don't continue to maintain at least a maintenance level of whatever system adaptations we have incurred, we're going to lose those. We're going to revert back to a lower training status. Individuality is complex because we're all complex. We have to consider the various concepts of trainability of the individual, their genetics, how well they chose their parents, and what types of adaptations they can actually achieve with training. And we also have to consider that some people are high responders and some are low responders, that no matter what you do in a certain type of exercise may not result in significant gains, whereas minimal type of activity in certain areas just seems to have a tremendous response in other individuals. So which of these components are most important to us as we attempt to age well? Well, all of them. It is important to understand that no matter what the age, or the goals that you have as an individual, all of these are important. Why? Because they are. Physical fitness doesn't change with the goals. The same principles apply. And so really, exercise is quite simple at its foundation. The principle of specificity refines these principles and these goals. The goals define the specificity. What else do we need to consider? Well, we have to consider opportunity cost, which is one of my favorite terms or phrases to use with my students. And what do I mean by opportunity cost? I mean that if we have a 24-hour day, everything that we do is either going to contribute or take away from those goals that we have set for ourselves. So when we look at what are we going to do, well, opportunity cost is predicated over time. If we had unlimited time to exercise, hopefully many of us would. Unfortunately, we don't. We have other responsibilities. We have family, we have work, we have life. And so we cannot contribute all the time that we might like to contribute to exercise. And so we don't have time to waste on that which is ineffective or less effective. It's all about optimization. So we don't have time to waste on ineffective or less effective exercise. And another important principle to consider is maximum recoverable volume. This is the maximum amount of work or exercise that we can do in a given workout and adequately recover for the next workout. And why do I say adequately? Because as we look at concepts like overloading, overreaching, underloading, underreaching, all these things kind of come into play. And I would argue that for most of us, we are undertraining. In other words, we can potentially do more exercise, more physical activity. And I would say from a well-centered fitness standpoint as well, more activities that are going to make us more whole in those areas of spiritual, physical, intellectual, emotional, and social. Overtraining when it comes to exercise is really more of an issue of poor planning than it is about doing too much in one single workout. I say adequately because there are times when we might be able to push ourselves a little bit beyond our ability to completely recover. But the point of doing this is with the intention of following that with what's referred to as a period of deload, where we're going to decrease our work output to allow for a bit more adaptation to occur. And you might do something like this intentionally, say before a vacation. We work really hard so that we know that we're pushing our bodies beyond its normal capacity to recover, again, without getting hurt, without doing too much to damage the muscles that we, are going to significantly impact our recoverability, but enough that the body is going to be able to take that prolonged period of time and utilize it for a more effective adaptation. So considering opportunity costs and trying to make the most of the time we have for training, what do we have to do? Well, we have to cut the BS. And what do I mean by this? We have to get rid of the exercises that are useless. Spending too much time stretching when we already have adequate flexibility is a waste of time when we need to build more strength or more cardiorespiratory endurance. If we have a very high VO2 max and we're not a competitive distance runner or triathlete or something like that, we don't need to be spending a significant amount of our time doing cardio when our muscles are atrophying and weakening over time. We need to spend more time in our strength training. We need to do what is relative to our individual goals and to try and bring up all those components of physical fitness as much as possible within our genetics, within our needs, the demands of our life, and so on. So when we look at cardiorespiratory endurance, many, many years ago, the father of aerobics, Kenneth Cooper, said, if you're running more than 30 minutes, you are doing it for more than your health. So how much we do for cardio really depends on our goals. What we do for aerobic fitness depends on our why. Why am I doing this? Am I training for a 5K, 10K, a marathon? Am I doing it to lose weight? Or am I just doing it for general heart health? We cannot confuse our cardiorespiratory goals and our body composition goals. If we're doing cardio solely for the purposes of losing weight, well, we have to consider how else we can manage our exercise to better improve our body composition. And that really brings us to the idea of muscle strength, muscle endurance. And I also like to talk about this concept of functional training. It's not a term that I really like to use. I think it gets misapplied in many, many situations. All exercise should be functional. All training should be functional, in my opinion. And so when we look at that, we have to look at what are the basic needs of the exerciser. And what are the basic needs of a muscle strength, muscle endurance type of program? Well, the basic needs are to stimulate the muscles and to stimulate them appropriately for the appropriate adaptation. And so I have over time come to the conclusion, and if you've been listening to this podcast, you have probably heard me talk about the basic 5 on numerous occasions. But I've come to kind of a conclusion that all strength endurance programs should begin with these basic 5: the squat, deadlift, bench press, overhead press and the row, or their variations. And again, it's not specific to heavy barbell deadlift, for example. If you're 85 years of age, you're not necessarily going to go into a Gold's Gym and grab onto a loaded up Olympic bar and deadlift with a belt on. You might start with just lifting a lighter weight off of the ground, basically using that hip hinge type of motion. And we've talked about that before in the podcast, where we can kind of break down the basic needs of the exercise program also in terms of the movement patterns. And that would be the squatting pattern again, the hip hinge, horizontal press, horizontal pull, vertical push, vertical pull, as well as carries. And the carries I don't include in the basic 5. I consider there's a little bit more accessory kind of core work, and we'll get back to that in a little bit here. But it's not to say that a lot of these other activities, accessory work as they might be called, are not useful. They're just not essential. It's not essential to be doing barbell curls, tricep extensions, a lot of crunches, and what is generally labeled as abdominal work. Abdominal exercises are not essential. They're not essential in the sense that if we are doing the right type of exercises, we are developing a good level of core stability within the muscles. And that is one of the primary functions really of the abdominal muscles. And so the core is essentially a stabilizing set of muscles. And I'll talk more about that probably in another podcast, but excessive core training really does not benefit the individual. You may be pursuing six-pack abs, and that's great. Most of us who are aging and trying to age well have a little less concern over what our six-pack abs look like. It's more for show. If you're a physique athlete, that's great. You got to do some of that. But for general health, well-being, and longevity, having the abs show is really not that important. And if you focus on body composition, they're going to eventually show because you're going to lose enough body fat for them to show. But it's not about definition, it's about functionality. And the core is to stabilize the body and to assist and permit proper acceleration, deceleration in multiple different directions. And so that's the type of activities that we should be considering when we consider the core. Flexibility is certainly important. Stretching is important. But how much time we spend should be driven by opportunity cost. I don't think it should be ignored. And quite honestly, I ignore stretching a little bit more than I should. But my focus in most of my exercise is to maintain my range of motion and thereby maintain my flexibility. And so stretching isn't quite as important unless, because of maybe prolonged sitting and driving and things like that, maybe my hip gets a little bit tight and I need to stretch that out a little bit, or because of spending a lot of time at the computer, my upper back might get a little bit too elongated so that I'm hunching forward a bit more and I might need to stretch out the pecs a little bit more. You basically want to consider how much time you have and what needs to be stretched, and stretch that and limit that. We also need to consider with flexibility that stretching out for a prolonged period before exercise generally is counterproductive because it's going to limit the amount of force that we can produce in the muscles and limit how much maybe we can generate in terms of building strength in the body. We are much better off stretching after exercise when our muscles and our tissues are warmed and they're going to have a more permanent deformation from that elongation from the stretching. And before exercise, just a simple warm up, getting the blood flowing, getting some dynamic movement to kind of open up the joints is going to be much more appropriate. When we look at body composition, we all know that body composition depends on how much fat we have relative to our lean tissue. And so our approach to improving body composition may involve increasing simply muscle mass. If we build muscle tissue without losing any fat, we have improved our body composition. We have become healthier. If we only lose fat and maintain our muscle, it's okay. But eventually, it becomes increasingly difficult to try and lose fat without losing some level of muscle because you're in a caloric deficit. The type of activity you might be doing often is detrimental to the maintenance of muscle tissue. And so sometimes our goal might be to build muscle and decrease fat and overall have a more effective approach to improving our body composition. Let's talk a little bit about what not to do and what to do in an exercise program. When it comes to developing an exercise program and the training, I prefer the old KISS principle. Remember, keep it simple, stupid. I discussed my epigenetics test with True Diagnostic co-founder Hannah Wendt in episode 162. Epigenetic testing measures baseline and changes in your pace of aging, giving you the power to steer your anti-aging or health and wellness journey in the right direction. I learned that I am aging well. Click on the affiliate link in the episode description, use the promo code AGEWELL, and receive a 12% discount on your epigenetics test and monitor your pace of aging. You should constantly be asking yourself the question, why? Why am I including this particular activity? What am I trying to accomplish? Is this the best way to accomplish it? And there's countless examples of things that I talk about with my students that I think are useless when it comes to certain types of sports training and things like that. There's a lot of drills. Many of us as older adults don't necessarily do these, but look at every activity that you're doing, you're exercising. Why am I doing this? What is the purpose for doing this? And if you really can't justify why you need to do that particular activity or what benefit you're getting from it, then it's probably not necessary. Really keep it to the basics, especially when we are looking at having a limited amount of time to exercise or wanting to contribute a limited amount of time to our exercise. So what should we expect if we initiate an exercise program? Well, part of it's going to depend on when do you start your exercise. I mean, the younger, obviously, the better, and the more overall long-term benefits we might get from it. A lot of it's going to depend on your genetics. I've mentioned before the Armstrong quote, if you want to be an elite athlete, choose your parents wisely. And so to a great extent, the genetics that have been passed on to us are going to affect whether we are a responder or a non-responder to certain types of exercise. We may respond better to endurance exercise than to strengthening or hypertrophy exercise. And that's okay, because no matter what we're doing, if we're doing exercise and we're doing it in those particular physiological areas, in those health-related components, in the neuromotor-related components, we may not have the capacity to get as fit as our neighbor in those particular areas, but there's always going to be some level of health and physical benefit that's going to come along with doing that particular type of activity. So let's talk a little bit about diet. There's a lot of different ways to approach diet. And, if you have ever dieted before, first of all, throw that term out, term diet, from the regard of losing weight. We want diet to be a habit, the types of food that we are consistently eating, and we should be in a consistent diet that requires that as we want to modify our body composition, will require us to basically modify slightly the components of that diet, increasing or decreasing our caloric intake, changing the amount of carbohydrates or fats that we might be eating in that. Again, the best approach to maintaining a healthy body composition is the KISS principle. And one of the best details that I have seen comes from Dr. Mike Israetel and some of his colleagues, where they identify the basic breakdown of what is important in maintaining a healthy body composition or in affecting one's diet. And about 50% of weight management is in caloric balance. How many calories in versus how many calories out. And that really brings us to three specific types of diet. You have a eucaloric diet, which is a diet that is maintaining your calories. Overall, your calories are equal in, equal out. And if you look over time, your weight may fluctuate a little bit, but you're not seeing, much of a fluctuation in weight greater than a few pounds around a certain set point. If I'm trying to gain weight, then I want to be in a hypercaloric diet where I'm eating not excessive, but I'm eating more calories than my body needs to maintain my weight. And so progressively, I'm going to be adding body composition, adding weight rather. And that weight ideally is going to be added in the form of muscle. But in some cases, some individuals might need to add a little bit of fat. Sometimes if we really want to build a lot of muscle, we might have to add a little bit of fat along with that and eventually cut, or as they generally refer in physique athletics, cut weight, where we're going to cut fat from our body composition. And we do that through a hypocaloric diet where we have fewer calories in relative to what we are expending. And that, again, it amounts to about half of the success in weight management. About 30% comes from what's referred to as macro balance, and that's the balance between your proteins, carbohydrates, and fats. And quite simply, protein is an important macro because it is important to building and maintaining muscle tissue and cell structure, tissue structure, enzymes, and all the many things in the body. So proteins and amino acids are highly important. So getting enough protein is important. And that should be roughly about 1 gram per pound of body weight on a regular basis. You can certainly get by with less of that, even as low as 0.6 if you're not really trying to build a lot of muscle mass and not training intensely. Above that, you may see some slight benefits in terms of added hypertrophy, but it really very rapidly becomes a diminishing return. And as well as we consider, particularly as we are aging and maybe we're on a limited budget, the cost of protein becomes pretty exorbitant. And so we want to kind of keep that at the appropriate minimum. And a 1 times your body weight is a pretty easy multiplication to do. Now, carbohydrates and fats become a little bit more complicated. I think when it comes to carbohydrates, for most of us, maintaining somewhere around 1 gram per pound of body weight works pretty well. The more intense the activity that you might be participating in, the more you might need. Somebody who is intensely involved in exercise might need as much as 2 grams per pound of body weight, or maybe even more. You have to kind of almost gauge that for yourself. If you are less active and you're trying to lose body fat, then reducing below that 1 gram per pound per body weight is probably going to be a bit more helpful. And then fat really should just kind of round out the calories that we consume. There's benefits to fat. We need some fat in our diet because obviously the nervous system needs fat for structure. We have a need for fat for various hormones in the body. The body needs fats in order to function properly. Fats are also helpful in limiting our caloric intake, and that seems counterintuitive because we think that fats have a lot of calories in them, but they give us a greater sense of fullness that might actually prohibit us from eating excessive amounts of calories. And so when we choose our fats, we want to choose fats that are healthy. We should be getting our fats from nut sources, from olive oil, avocado, perhaps coconut oil, some healthy butters, getting fats from fatty fish, and trying to limit more of the red meat animal fats, certainly trans fats and fats that are added to processed foods, which we should be trying to avoid the processed foods in the first place. But any excessive, unhealthy added fats we should try and avoid, and be conscious about the types of fat that we are eating to balance out our calories. So we can add more fat if we need more calories. We can take it away if we need fewer calories. And that's probably one of the easiest areas in which to manipulate our diet to move from a hypercaloric to a hypocaloric diet is just simply by reducing the amount of fat relative to the foods that we are eating. Other components that we don't really need to get into in great specifics with the older population because simply we're not as involved in performance as, say, an athlete might be or a younger person who is trying to hypertrophy, say, for just simply for physique competition or just simply to look better. But these are nutrient timing, food composition, and then lastly, supplementation. Nutrient timing can be important. I mean, it's best to get our carbohydrates around the times when we are the most active and have lower carbohydrates when we are least active, and probably have a little bit more fat during the periods of time when we are not going to be training, but we need some sustained fullness in our bellies to keep us from being hungry between meals. Food composition is only about 5% of our dietary success or our weight management success. And so it isn't quite as important, whether we're eating organic or frozen vegetables or, whether they're canned or, whether even processing has a rather modest effect on our weight management overall. And so we don't have to get all wound up over food composition, although as our goals become more refined, certainly that should be a bigger factor. And then lastly, supplementation. Unfortunately, most people, when they go to start losing weight, start immediately going to the hacks and the fast tracks to losing weight, and they go after supplementations, things that are supposed to suppress appetite or speed up metabolism and all those types of things. And those may have a slight effect when you get down to the most low percent body fats and you're trying to get, as the bodybuilding population would say, shredded. You're trying to really lose that extra fat and get really, really lean. There it might have some level of importance. But if you're just starting out and you're 50 pounds overweight, taking supplements is going to do very little for you. And your best bet is to just go with decreasing your caloric intake and begin to lose the weight. Again, keep it simple. I believe in small changes can have big effects. So look at the little things that you can change, a few calories here, a few calories there, and that begins to add up very rapidly over time. Diet is going to depend on goals. If you're trying to gain or you're trying to lose weight, are you trying to gain muscle? Or are you trying to lose fat? Are you training? Are you not training? How much are you training? What are your goals? These are all very important factors that we need to consider as we program our exercise. But the important thing is just to begin to exercise, to start doing something. And that's why I like the basic 5. If you're going to lift weights, just start it. Just get those basic movements. And it's not going to matter so much what are you doing unless you have really significant goals. If you prefer doing machines, that's great. And especially for many of us older adults, as we are just getting into lifting weights, machines might give us a little better stability, a little bit better sense of how the muscle needs to contract through its range of motion. And so it's fine to use machines and build from that and to keep things basic. You don't have to really get complicated with your programming. 8 to 10, 8 to 12 repetitions of maybe 2 or 3 sets of the various exercises is going to be very effective for a beginner exerciser. And as you progress, then you can begin to refine things a little bit more. But important thing for us as we attempt to, age well, is to be moving well, and to be moving more, and to continue to try and improve our cardiorespiratory endurance, our muscle endurance, our muscle strength, improve and maintain our flexibility, improve and maintain our body composition, and to not neglect the other things like the neuromotor related components of physical fitness. Oftentimes we tend to think of those as only being for the athletes and the young people. And we think of power and speed as something that is only done in athletics. Well, the reality is, if we are aging, especially the older we get, the more we need power and speed. We want to be able to get across that crosswalk quick so that the cars coming are not going to be delayed, or, we're not running the risk of getting hit by a car. We want to be able to get around more effectively. We want to be able to make quick movements if called upon. That's one of the best ways that we can prevent falls. I've mentioned before in one of our recent episodes, we had Carmine Arpaia on to talk about fitness in the older population, and we learned about Carmine's law, which Carmine's law states that strength plus posture equals balance. And those two components are very important for us to develop and to prevent our potential for falls. And so not only are we looking at strengthening the muscles, but we also want to strengthen them in a way that are going to better align our posture, align our vertebral column, get us more upright. So there we might need a little bit more stretching to help assist with posture. But balance is hugely important for us in order to be able to prevent falls and reduce many of the injuries that we experience as we age. Coordination goes along with that as well. Being able to move in multiple directions in, effective manners also goes along with agility. Agility is basically defined as the ability to quickly and accurately change directions. And if we are walking along, having some strength, some speed, some power, good posture, which leads to better balance, in coordination with a stronger core, as we come across an obstacle in our path, or your pet jumps out in front of you and you have a tendency to kind of begin to lose your balance, you can contract the right muscles to move yourself in the right direction, to right your balance and keep yourself upright and prevent a fall. Reaction time. We want to be able to continue driving, continuing to be safe, to be able to react to the things around us. So these are not things that are limited to the athlete. These are things that we should be practicing through multi-directional movements that require quick and accurate decision-making. But it doesn't have to necessarily be in the exercise facility, in the gym, dancing, doing just simple movements in multiple directions are going to help us to improve these factors. And so I hope today we kind of revisited enough of the basics to get you interested in exercising again, if you have not been exercising, to help you to realize that no matter where you are in your fitness journey, that moving forward is not a big, complicated task. It is something that we can approach quite simply, and it can fit into all of our lives. It does not require a tremendous amount of time to be modestly fit as we age and to be able to, age well. If we can contribute 30 minutes to an hour a day, that's fantastic. If we only have 15 minutes here and there throughout the day to contribute to the various components of physical fitness, that's great. That's going to be something that is going to move us forward. The more time that we have available or make available, because really we have the time available, it's a matter of making that time available, the more success we're going to see in maintaining and growing our physical health and being able to age well. And so I hope today was helpful, and I hope that you will start exercising if you have not been exercising. And if you have been exercising, take a good look at what are you doing and is that effective? Is it helping me work toward my goals? And if you're not reaching your goals, why? And I hope this has helped you to, age well. Thank you for listening. I hope you benefited from today's podcast. And until next time, keep aging well.